right, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next Elite Home Tutoring webinar. If you weren't here on the previous webinars, my name is Karen. I'm the Associate Counselor here at Plexuss, and we have with us Christine, who is the tutor from Elite Home Tutoring. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If I put in the chat to connect with Elite Home Tutoring, and it is in the introductory notes, so you can go ahead and copy and paste that link into your browser so you can go ahead and connect with Elite Home Tutoring. If you would like to ask questions to Christine while she is lecturing, you can go ahead and ask the question in the chat. You can send it to everyone so Christine can see it as well, or you can send it to me privately so I can ask the question to Christine. You're also welcome to ask your question directly to Christine by using the raise hand option, and you can access it by clicking participants, and the raise hand option should be right there. You will then wait for me to call on you, and then you'll be able to speak to Christine directly. All right, I think that's it for the intro notes. There are some questions in the chat that I would like to start with. For Christine, let's start with a question from E. Reed. Would it still be a good idea to take the ACT as well, or instead, and how different is the studying for the ACT or trying to study for both?
Okay, it's nice to be here. Thank you, Karen. That question was related to the fact that the SAT has had some cancellations and the ACT still has some summer plans for testing. We'll see what happens there. But to answer more specifically, it is always a good idea to consider both tests because you might be more adept, more capable at one of them than the other. They both test critical thinking, and but they are different. And sometimes you can max out on one test and go, okay, I can't get higher than that, and then you switch to the other, and all of a sudden goes up a few points, makes a difference. As you know, the SAT is at a 1600 and the ACT is at a 36. So a 1500 is about the same as a 32 or 33. And I highly recommend giving it a try. The ACT is normally, colleges normally do not ask how many times you took the test or ask for all of your records of the test. So there is an advantage there as well because you can take it a few times and see how you do. If you happen to do well on both, all the better to submit both scores because it strengthens your application, which is the goal. Put everything in. For example, some of the colleges are saying SAT and ACT are optional this year because of the circumstances. If you can take it and you do well, put it in there because even though it's optional, it's always better to make your application as strong as possible. Even with all the problems going on in society, I still took the time to study and get that score and work hard. As far as overlap, the English section on the ACT is very, very much like the writing and language. A little bit more grammar, but once you learn the grammar, it's great. It's pretty nice to be able to master that part. The reading comprehension is similar. So when you're preparing for one, you're preparing for the other. The timing's a little different on the reading. It's a little quicker pace, but a little more straightforward on the ACT. And then the math is a bit similar, but there's overlap, but there's also some differences. You have a calculator for the entire test, so that's kind of cool. And then the science section is also fast-paced. You don't need to know a ton of science, but you do need to know how to read charts and tables. So I hope that helps on that. And I think we got another question or two.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me know if that answers your question. And there is a question from Jonathan. Will these happen? Okay, she said yes. Okay. Will these happen every year? Because he missed the function one. And will there be an English version of these?
An English version. Karen or I could answer that question. They are on a Plexuss YouTube?
Yes. Okay. If you missed the previous webinars, they are located on our Plexuss YouTube page. It is called Plexuss Social Media. And I will put the link for you in the chat when I have it, okay? When I access it.
And unless the test changes, I mean, they would be able to be accessed next year as well. So as far as review goes. Okay, any other starter questions, Karen, or the group?
Any questions right now before we start the webinar? Right, I don't think so.
Okay, very good. Okay, so today we're looking at advanced math and additional math topics on the SAT. And let me get rid of my chat box for a second so I can see the whole screen. There we go. And yes, there's advanced math on the test. We've talked about the different categories. We're going to talk about it today. But something that's important to realize is that what makes the math advanced, and when they say this question is hard, is frequently because there's a little trick involved, or it's the way they ask the question. Once you figure out what they're asking in their odd sort of way, you go, well, that's not much at all. That's just what I was doing a long time ago. So don't be surprised when the math is not that hard, but just getting to what to do is the big thing. The most frequent mistake made on the test, and then I'll share my screen. The most frequent mistakes that are made are from not going back. And you do the math, you figure it out, and then thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Karen. You've got our YouTube channel up there now. You do the math, and then at the last minute, you don't go back and look at the question, and it didn't ask you to solve for X, it asked you to solve for X plus 5 or something odd, and then you get it wrong. So that's the most frequent mistake is just not going back and checking what they're asking for. Okay, so that's tops. That's tops. It doesn't seem like hard math, but that's the facts. Okay. Whenever you can, if you're taking more than one SAT test, if it's available, get a copy, request a copy of the Q&A, the questions and answer services. They're not available at every test, but when they are available, if you're going to take that test again, you want to be able to see what kind of mistakes you made. If you don't know what kind of mistakes you're making yet, then you want to know. So that's a big thing too. So let's see what we can do sharing wise. Zoom through here. We're just a little bit late in our timing. Okay, I'd like to give you guys opportunities to try your hand at some of these. Okay, so SAT math and advanced math and additional SAT math topics. About the advanced math, we can see my screen, correct? Yep, okay. Many questions in the math section. I'm looking at A here, are concepts that you actually learned in high school, junior high, excuse me, but you haven't looked at them in a long time. You're doing maybe pre-calc or advanced functions, but a lot of the questions have to do with averaging, percentages, proportions, and probability. So we're going to do a quick little review of that, and remember that you will pick up these skills again because you've done them before pretty quickly, but just remember that you have to look for when I can apply this. Okay, many difficult SAT questions build on these basic concepts, requiring you to combine multiple steps or techniques, or use charts and data to get to your numbers. 99% of these types of questions, the more challenging and odd questions, are on the calculator permitted section. Every once in a while, no calculator. Okay, the continued math strategy, and this is beyond everything else that we talk about, all of the details. Look at and compare the answer choices to help you understand what the question's asking. Plug in the answers for those of you that don't know PETA. Plug in the answers. Plug in numbers for your variables. When you're given a variable, you can plug in numbers either from the answer or into the question. And then always use a process of elimination to figure out your answers, especially if you're a little bit stuck. And always check to be sure you're answering the question. As I said, don't necessarily answer for X or for Y, but for whatever they ask you for, X plus Y, for example. Okay, that's the basics. First of all, ratios and proportions. Many questions will require you to set up a portion for part or all of the math questions. So be ready to use a proportion to accurately and quickly solve a variety of questions, question types. just have it ready. I don't recommend doing it in your head. I recommend writing it down because they will set you up for little traps. So super important. Critical thinking more than anything, not necessarily straight knowledge. Ratio or proportion of x to y can be expressed in these three ways. X over y, the ratio of x to y, or x and then the colon and y. So they will ask the question in a variety of ways. And remember that they can all be turned into a fraction, which is the way that we're most comfortable working with proportions. Okay, here's an example. Okay, an acidic solution is mixed so that the mass ratio of nitric acid to water is 2 to 7, or 2 over 7. If the total of 270 grams of acid solution is mixed, how many more grams of water are there than the nitric acid? Okay, 60, 110, 150, 210. How to solve it? Underline your question and the important parts. And I've put them in italics. How many more grams of water than there are there than nitric acid? First thing you want to notice there is I need to set up a proportion. And they're asking for how much more. So you're not solving directly. So you're not done until you're done. Okay, underline. So nitric acid over water, they tell you is equal to 2 over 7. That you got that from the question. And the acid solution is a total of 270. In order to find out how much more water than nitric acid, you'll need to know how much of each. And then you subtract. So steps. Let x be the common multiple. That's a common way to do when you've got a total and you have a ratio. 2x plus 7x is equal to 270 because that's the ratio they're in. And we're finding just the common multiple first. So 9x combined is equal to 270. That makes x 30. And so therefore, I plug in 30 for x, and that gives me a 60 for nitric acid and 210 for water. That's a nice way to deal with those proportions, the common multiple. And just to double check, that did add up to 270. So I'm good to go. I didn't make any mistakes. Now, you're not done. Notice, let me go back up there. Notice that if I plugged in any other answer, I would get it wrong. Possible answers there. So then the difference is 210 minus 60, water minus nitric acid, which is 150, which is C. So being careful, I needed a proportion, but I had to think it through a little bit. Okay. Next example, the next category of math, advanced math, percentage and percentage change. Very common again on the test. Using your percentages, be comfortable flipping them around, working them comfortably. Don't be weak in them. A lot of advanced questions related. A number, example here, a number is increased by 25% and then decreased by 20%. The result is what percent of the original number? Okay. Might want to reread and break it into chunks. A number is increased by 25% and then decreased by 20%. The result is what percent of the original number? Do we know the original number? No. Do we need to know? No. We could set up an equation. That's going to be tough. So you're not given a particular number to work with. So instead of dealing with the question really abstractly, immediately plug in a number to work with. And since the question is dealing with percentages, a good number to use for these kinds of questions is 100, because it's easy to find 20% of 100, for example. So strategy here, break it down and plug in, use a number that'll be easy to work with. No matter what number you pick, it's going to be the same percent of that original number. So let's work the problem in bite-sized chunks. 25% of 100 is 25. So now you increase your 100 to 125 because that's what your question told you to do. Okay, let me make it so you can see the It's a question there. There we go. Decrease 125 by 20% is the next step. 20% of 125 is 25. So 125 minus 25 is 100. And then the last part of the question, the result, 100, is what percent of the original number? It is 100%, the number that you originally picked. If you had picked 80, you would still end up with 80% of your original number. Or 100% of your original number, not 80, 100% of your original number. So this works to plug in, and that's a strategy that will work for you instead of creating an abstract equation and having to tire your brain out. Okay, another probably 2 questions on each SAT approximately will be in percentage change, which we said the other day was the difference of the 2 numbers that you're given divided by the original number, not the new number, and multiply times 100. Okay, example. The population of town A is 12,979 people in 1995. The population, when measured again in 2005, is 22,752. What was the change in population to the nearest whole percentage point? To the nearest whole percentage point, instantly you say it's not going to be a whole number. It's going to be approximate. So I have a right to be a little bit off when I do the math here. So those are the important details of the question. How to solve. Notice the question is asking for percent. So use the percentage change formula. Difference over the original times 100. There are 2 numbers. Subtract and divide by the original number. That gives you 0.7529 times 100 is approximately to the nearest whole percent, answer C. If it didn't say to the nearest, if it said, what is the percent, then you probably did something wrong because it can't be approximate unless they tell you. That's the good part about the SAT. They have to be very straightforward. Averaging, the sum of a certain set of numbers divided by however many numbers there are. You will use them in different ways. This is a simple one. So the average is of 3, 7, and 8. Add them together, divide by 3, something you learned a long time ago. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Here's a good example. Maria has taken 4 chemistry tests and has an average score of 80. If she scores a 90 on her 5th test, what is her average for these 5 tests? Okay, there's your answer choices. Whenever you get an averaging type of question, it's not going to be super straightforward. It's going to be something like this, or they tell you maybe they removed one of the tests and what's the new average. Always answer step number 1. Start by multiplying the average number they give you by the number of items, the 4 here in this case, to give you the total number of points. So you don't need to know every single test score, just the total. I don't need to know that one of them was 85 and one of them. So if we multiply, 80 times 4 is 320. Let's see, there we go again. And then we go on to the next step. Number 2 is add the 5th test score of 90 to the 320 total. That gives us 410. Now it seems straightforward. You go back to the question. Oh, they want the new average. I have a new total. Divide by 5, the new number, and our answer is C. Okay. So remember, multiply out first is the key, and then do the next step. Probability. SAT questions usually refer to a chart on these. Probability is the number of possible outcomes out of the number of events. So you'd be looking at a chart and have to pick it apart. Percentage growth, something that most of you have done. They keep it pretty simple. The formula is A equals P times 1 plus R to the T power. So the final amount is equal to the original amount times 1 plus the rate, the percentage rate, that's a decimal, or a percentage rate, to the however much time they're talking about. Here's our question. Maria, again, deposits $100 into the bank account that earns an annual, once a year, interest rate of 4%. If she does not make any additional deposits, and makes no withdrawals, so nothing changes, how long will it take her in years to increase the value of her account by at least 60%? Okay, know the equation. That's in step one. I need to know the percentage formula, the percent growth and decay formula. Memorize it. Don't rely. It's not going to be at the beginning of your test in the reference chart. And then the next step is know the question. How many years will it take? So what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that one of these answers is going to be the number of years, correct years, that I'm going to put into the t part of this equation, time. So I can use the answers. I can plug in the answers. Okay, so figure out first on number 3 here, how much a 60% increase would be. Increase 60% of 100, so 0.6 plus 100 equals 60. 60 plus 100 is equal to 160. So at least 160 should be the final amount of A in the percent change equation. So A is 160. Now plug in your numbers into the equation from the question. 160 is equal to 100 times 1.04 to a certain number of years. Now plug in the answers, Peta. Since they represent the number of years Becca, why did I say Maria? It is Becca, kept her money in the account. Remember your PEMDAS, okay? Remember to do your parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, and lastly, addition and subtraction. Don't do that out of order, you'll get the wrong answer. So when we plug in, if you happen to start with A, you got the correct answer, 100 times 1.04. First to the 12th power is equal to 160.10, which is over 160, and we got our answer. Okay, very nice. And now let's go and take a look at some of the tests here with our 5 minutes or so that we have left. And okay, test. Okie dokie. Question number 2. This is from practice test 2. A quality control manager at a factory selects 7 light bulbs at random for inspection out of every 40 light bulbs produced. At this rate, how many light bulbs will be inspected if the factory produces 20,000 light bulbs? So notice there's a proportion. The first thing you got to notice, I got to make a proportion. So 7 for every 400, that's the same as saying 7 out of 400, 7 over 400 is equal to X over 20,000. Cross multiply, again, something that you haven't done in a long time. 7 times 20,000 is equal to 400 times X. And then solve like a simple algebraic equation. Divide both sides by 400, gives you 350. Double check the question. How many light bulbs? That's what they're asking. Your answer is B. No problem there. Okay. Next one. Okay. Here we have a probability. Typical. So lots to read. Try not to waste your time on too many details. Let's read. We got the results on the bar exam of law schools graduates. The table above summarizes the results of 200 law school students. So notice I underlined 200 who took the bar. If you can take a glance, that looks like 200 right there. If one of the surveyed graduates who passed the bar exam is chosen at random for an interview, what is the probability that the person chosen did not take the review? Of course, read carefully, don't rush. Because this is all, since it's fairly straightforward, it's all about hurrying and then making a silly mistake. So you're trying to get to the questions that are ahead, and then you could easily make a silly mistake. I underlined the word not, because that could easily be missed in the rush. So pass the bar, boom, 18 plus 7 is 25. Did not take a review course, right here, of those that passed the bar. make a proportion, 7/25. Double check the question, did not take the review course. Yes, my answer is B. So notice how carefully I'm doing that. It's very common to make little mistakes, very common. Okay, your turn, here we go. I will read the question. Notice the number of registered voters in the United States in 2012. And then I'll give you a few moments, a minute or so, and then we'll go over it. The table above shows the number of registered voters in 2012 in thousands in 4 geographic regions and 5 age groups. Based on the table, if a registered voter who was 18 to 24 in 2012 is chosen at random, which of the following is closest to the probability that the registered voter was from the Midwest region? Okay, your turn.
Feel free to send your answer to everyone or to me privately when you're finished.
In the chat, yes.
Mhm.
Thank you. Gotta give it a shot here. "30 seconds more. Definitely a lot of numbers there. So it's about narrowing it down. Okay. You ready, Karen?
There is no answers
Okay.
yet. I think, oh, we have one
All right.
answer.
Okay. So,
If you all have any questions about the question, feel free to let us know as well.
yeah.
Okay, they're
just
coming in.
Sassy when I'm waiting. I don't want to rush people, but and you will get faster at these as you see repetitive types of questions.
Let's give 10 more seconds.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
What do we have, Karen?
We have 2 Bs.
Okay, very good. Those of you that weren't sure, B is the correct answer. Well done. That was about a minute and a half of time. So that's doable. It's about how much time you have per question between the fastest ones and the slowest ones. Watch your time as well. So, okay, so first of all, circle the important information. Notice that it said 18 to 44. So I made sure that I circled both of those because in the rush of things, you could easily just pick one of those categories and then that will make it wrong. And one of those answers with just one of the categories isn't the answer. Totals up. Totals of everything is down here. Totals of the Midwest is here because it asks about the Midwest region. And then make a proportion, which is a fraction, and convert to a decimal by dividing. basic stuff. The big thing is not getting distracted by too much information and circling the important information. Okay, let's do another one here. Okay, here we go. So your turn. Radioactive substance decays at an annual rate of 13%. If the initial amount of the substance is 325 grams, which of the following functions F models the remaining amount of dust substance in the grams T years later? So you do need to know that percent increase and decrease in order to get this right. Okay, so we'll watch our time here. Do not know the equation, and when I go to the next page, be sure to write that down and keep it in your notes for things to put up on your mirror in your bathroom to memorize way before the test. Okay, answers are coming in. Thirty seconds. And almost. Okay, let's take a look at it.
We have 2 A's.
Okay. That is correct. Nicely done. Didn't get tripped up. I like it. A radioactive substance. So the first thing we do is we notice that this is a growth and decay formula, and we make sure we have that formula down. Now the second thing we'll do is to carefully plug in from the question and use answers. Use the answer. So we've got 2A and B look very similar. They use 325 as the principal, which is what it says. The initial amount means the same as the principal. That's 325. Those are in the correct spot for this formula. So we can cross out C and D that have some percentages here and some decimals. Then we're going to decide between A and B.
Christine, there is a question.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
There is a question from Jonathan.
Uh-huh.
He asked, when it decays, do you gotta subtract from 1?
Yes. Yes, that's right. Good question. That will help us decide between the 0.87 and the 0.13. The other part that allows us to decide is that it says what is which of the following models the remaining amount of the substance, the remaining amount. So the amount of decay is not what we're looking for. We're looking at the remaining amount. So that is the reason that we're using the 87% or the 0.87 as opposed to the 0.13. And even though this says 13%, because it's asking for, so it would decay, it would go down by that. But So it's not 1.13, but it's not correct because they're asking for what's left. So that gives us the answer of A, which is what a couple of you got. And we can't get to our last question because we're out of time, unfortunately, for today. But next time tomorrow we'll be looking at geometry and trigonometry. If somehow we get through that, I will bring these other last questions up for us. Okay, Karen, it's all yours.
Thank you, Christine.
Welcome.
I'm going to share my screen. All right. Thank you very much, Christine, for today's webinar. Our next webinar, as Christine mentioned, is still on the SAT math test, geometry and trigonometry. It will be tomorrow, April 23rd at 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We would very much appreciate it if you download our Plexuss app. If you download our app, you'll be able to receive instant notifications from my counselor. We'd also very much appreciate it if you rate it and review our app. If you are loving these webinars, feel free to go ahead and rate and review our webinars as well through the App Store or Google Play. We appreciate any feedback you are able to give us. Next, chat with my counselor if you have any questions regarding this webinar, or if you would like to reach out about your specific journey to higher education, we're happy to answer those questions as well. And connect with Elite Home Tutoring on Plexuss. I put the link at the beginning of the chat, in the introductory notes of this webinar. Another way you can access their profile is by clicking on the logo at the top of the Plexuss newsfeed page. You will see the banner with the webinar info. Their logo is right there. If you click on it, you'll be able to access their profile from there. And lastly, it is not on the list, but all of the recorded webinars are on our Plexuss YouTube page, as we mentioned in the beginning of the webinar. Our Plexuss YouTube page, it is called Plexuss Social Media. All of our previous webinars were recorded. This webinar was also recorded and will be available within 24 hours. All right, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. We will see you all tomorrow for the geometry and trigonometry webinar. Bye, everyone.